In the aftermath of revolts, fields weren't just covered with bodies, they were soaked in lessons meant to be remembered. There existed a punishment so cruel it made even the hangman tremble, a method designed not to kill quickly, but to make death crawl inch by inch. It was called sawing in half. Some records claim it began during the Persian Empire, others during early Christian persecution. But in medieval Europe, it became the church's most feared spectacle. A single wooden frame, a coarse rope, and a long metal saw were all it took to erase a human life while keeping the soul trapped inside for as long as possible. The process became a ritual of warning. Victims were often accused of blasphemy, sorcery, or treason, crimes not just against rulers, but against heaven itself. The church justified every slice as an offering to purity, a way to cleanse the soul through agony. Records from medieval tribunals describe how priests blessed the tools before the act, and how townspeople gathered not just out of cruelty, but out of fear. They believed that witnessing such punishment could save them from sin. The mechanics of sawing are simple in tools and horrific in effect: a long, coarse saw, a wooden frame or scaffold, and a body destined to become an example. The execution begins with restraint. Victims are bound so they cannot pull away, sometimes they are tied to a tree, sometimes fixed to a plank. In many accounts the condemned are turned upside down, a deliberate choice. Hung by the feet, the head hangs low and blood rushes to the skull. That single inversion turns what might have been a short, brutal act into an endurance of sensation. The brain stays awake longer even as the body is violated. The saw itself is a wide, two-person crosscut or a long serrated blade. Two executioners may work together, pulling in opposite directions, or a single man may labor with steady, mechanical strokes. The first passes of the saw find flesh and tendon. The work proceeds slowly because the goal is not just to sever but to prolong. The position and the deliberate pace mean major arteries are often avoided at first. Cutting too quickly would end life and end the spectacle. Instead, the saw grinds through muscle and bone with a cold, repetitive rhythm that the crowd can count like a heartbeat. Executioners use techniques to keep the victim conscious longer. Gags may be forced into mouths to muffle cries, ropes are tightened so movement becomes impossible, oil or sand may be applied to the saw to change the friction and control the rate of cutting. The condemned often scream at first, then enter a state where shuddering, gasps, and strained breathing replace coherent sound. Record keepers and chroniclers note one cruel fact again and again: suspended upside down, the condemned sometimes live long enough to see the faces of those who brought them there. To the crowd, the method is a slow demonstration of power. To authorities, it is a way to convert punishment into pedagogy. Pain becomes a lesson shaped in public. The saw's monotony is part of its terror. Each stroke promises the same small progress toward the inevitable, and each stroke allows onlookers to imagine themselves spared by slightly different choices. That calculated, measured cruelty is what made sawing more than an execution, it made it a tool of control. Sawing does not belong to a single people or century, it appears again and again across time as rulers look for a punishment that teaches by terror. Early chroniclers and later historians link the practice to ancient Persia, where betrayal of the king is said to have earned the severest of penalties, and execution meant to mark the treacherous body as an example. Over the centuries similar accounts appear in Roman sources and later medieval chronicles. When central authority fears collapse, extreme punishments follow. Religious martyrlore preserves one of the most famous images associated with sawing. Medieval collections of saints' lives and later encyclopedias record traditions that the Apostle Simon, Simon the Zealot, was martyred by being cut with a saw, a story that cements the method in Christian imagination and art, even if historians debate its literal accuracy. Painful as it is to read, these legendary accounts show how sawing enters cultural memory as both punishment and symbol. Beyond Christian Europe, comparable methods of slow, fragmenting execution appear in other legal traditions. In China, The practice called lynching or slow slicing, a controlled, piecemeal cutting that could last for hours, serves a similar social function: public, ritualized destruction of a body deemed corrupt or dangerous. While lynching differs technically from hanging and sawing, the shared logic is clear. Prolonged physical dismemberment is a statement against crimes that threaten the moral order. Practical use of sawing varies by place and period. Kings, military commanders, and inquisitors adopt it when they want a spectacle that dissuades. Inquisitorial tribunals and some secular courts in late medieval Europe keep harsh penalties on the books. Chronicles, woodcuts, and legal records record executions meant to intimidate rebellious townspeople, suspected poisoners, or high-profile traitors. The executioner, a professional who often lives outside ordinary society, becomes the state's visible hand, carrying out punishments that underline both legal authority and social exclusion. Because records are uneven and legends mix with facts, historians proceed carefully. Some well-known stories, saints and martyrs, sensational chronicler reports, may amplify or dramatize what actually happened. Still, across cultures the pattern repeats. When institutions want to make an example of someone, they choose a method that makes suffering public and memorable. Sawing, whether literal or as part of a broader repertoire of slow mutilations, proves effective at turning a single body into a warning for many. By the late Middle Ages, attitudes toward public executions began to shift. Rulers, jurists, and citizens started questioning whether prolonged, grotesque punishments like sawing truly served justice, or whether they revealed more about cruelty than authority. Gradually, the method fell out of favor, replaced by executions designed to end life more swiftly, such as beheading with an axe or, later, the guillotine in France. The shift was not merely practical, it reflected a slow evolution in moral and political thought, as societies began to value control over spectacle. Even as the practice faded, its reputation endured. Chronicles, court records, and religious texts preserved its memory, ensuring that the horror of sawing in half became emblematic of medieval brutality. Artists painted it, writers described it, and the act became a cultural symbol, a reminder of the extremes humans would go to enforce obedience. Executioners' techniques were refined, laws codified, and yet the memory of the saw persisted, a grim testament to an era when power was measured in how long it could prolong agony. Sawing in half, once a tool of intimidation and punishment, became a historical lesson in the mechanics of fear and control. It vanished from practical use, but its legacy shaped public consciousness, reminding later generations how law and terror were once inseparable. Societies moved toward more humane executions, but the Middle Ages had already written the image of slow, deliberate torment into the record of history, a cautionary illustration of human cruelty wielded as authority. Sawing, like other extreme punishments, was never just about ending a life, it was about shaping a society through fear. In the Middle Ages, rulers, inquisitors, and judges understood that the body could speak in ways words could not. A man or woman suspended, restrained, and slowly cut became a living message: rebellion, heresy, or betrayal would not be tolerated. Every agonizing moment was a reminder to those watching that power could reach into flesh and bone, and that disobedience carried consequences far beyond mere death. Public executions were designed as ritualized lessons. The crowd did not come merely for spectacle, they came to witness the enforcement of moral and political order. The visible suffering of the condemned was meant to imprint on the collective memory, to make the abstract concept of justice tangible. In a world where literacy was limited, seeing the extremes of punishment was the clearest way to educate and intimidate.